In this demonstration, I'm going to show how to use the Google Maps API inside of an Android application. So here on the screen I'm showing sort of a sample of what we're going to build, a couple buttons on the top, and the Google Maps API in the middle. So we can zoom, for example, it'll zoom and pan to a location, and I can move back to the other location, switching map tile sets, and also putting a marker on the map. Now I will mention at the start here, I've done some changes to my emulator so that it will actually run the Google Apps applications inside of it. You can find online how to do that. It's a bit of a trick to actually have it run inside here. Normally you'll have to run it inside of a physical device that runs Android. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the web and just search for Google Maps API Android. And the top hit is probably going to be this page. And on it, there is a Getting Started guide. This is pretty good. It'll allow you to walk through how to get set up using the Google Maps API v2. The first thing we're going to have to do is we're actually going to have to get an ID from Google. So you're going to have to get this API key. It's going to be specific to you and your computer. What happens is every time you build an application, even for debug mode, there's on your computer a key store. It stores some private key for yourself, and it signs your application when it gets downloaded. So what you're going to do is you're going to set up with Google the sort of the SHA-1 hash of your private key, and that's going to be recorded in their sort of database, and they're going to give you back a key so that you can use their services. It'll allow them to track kind of which applications are using things and maintain control if some application was misbehaving. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to kind of scroll down here, and we've got to, this will explain the sort of process. I want to expand this displaying debug certificate. You're going to need to do this to figure out what information you need to give to Google. Again, this is only for the debug release mode they show afterwards. So if you're running, for example, Windows, they give the complete command line to, here that you're going to want to execute. The only thing you're going to need to change is your username. So it's the username that Windows knows you as you log on to the machine. Now again, this is key to the specific machine you're on. If you do happen to work on multiple machines, you're going to need to copy your key store, which is this path right here. Copy that between the two computers and making sure that the same key store is in both locations. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem trying to download or trying to contact their servers. So when you run that command, it's going to generate the following output on the screen. Of course, your numbers will be different. And what we really care about here is the SHA-1, pardon me. So that you have to give to Google. As shown down here a bit further, you'll create the API project and click on the Google API console. You'll then be asked to log in. I'll show you here. It wants you to log in. Of course, I'm not actually going to show you how to do that here, but then it'll ask you to enter in that SHA-1 key you saw above. So that'll be looking something like this. The thing is that you have to add to it the domain or the package that you expect to be working with. So give it some package name with whatever you're working on, and that will then key it to your project, and Google will give you back this magic code, or something similar. Using that magic code, you can then tell Google servers which application it is that's using it, and it'll allow it to actually function. And then down here they give you some steps on how to actually add it to your project. So let's go through and walk through that process now. So I'm going to switch back over to my Java, my Android, and I'm going to create a new Android application, and let's call it Demo of Google Maps v2. Now be careful when you set up the package here. The whole package has got to be what you told Google you were going to use. So whatever you created that API key for, now you've got to hold true to that bargain. So I happen to have used ca.sfu.cmpt276.bphraser plus my private key from the key store, generated me the key, and so I'm going to run this. And we'll just create this, whiz through, create me a new activity. So we're going to have to edit three things. We're going to spend a lot of time editing the manifest. We're also going to edit the XML here for my layout, as well as spending some time in the Java to actually make it do what we want. But to start with, there's a fair amount of changes to the manifest. So we can make sure here that I've got the package name correct. It's got to match exactly what you told Google, otherwise it's not going to run. So the next thing to do is we're going to add in some permissions. We're effectively going to be adding in some code that's going to tell Google server that we want to use the permissions we were given a moment ago. So I'll copy and paste this from what I have in an off-screen text file. Effectively, this is going to create a new permission, as shown here. Again, we've got the package name that we told Google about, and I'm going to use permissions to map receive, and here we go, we have the same permissions. So that's one of the key things. Next, we need to give it some standard sort of Android permissions to do the basic things, like access the internet, for example, because we of course need to ask their servers for these things. So these are also found on that website we looked at. Access the internet, network state, right to external storage, and the read G services. All of these are required in order to use the API, the Maps API. Then you can optionally support these two things, which is sort of your location finding if you wanted to support location-enabled services. We're not going to work with that, but it's probably a reasonable thing to put in here because most people are going to use that. And then I'm going to tell it that I'm going to use, this is OpenGL version 2.0. And that's going to tell it, allow it to actually render to the screen. It needs to support this, otherwise you are going to have a problem with sort of rendering it to the screen. It requires that. And then the one last thing, and this is perhaps also a critical factor, is we need to tell our application what to talk to the Google services as. So under this application, after the end brace here that closes that, I'm going to add another child into my XML, and it's going to be the metadata. So the metadata here is name for the Android Maps key, and here is the key that Google gave me. Again, yours is going to be different. Make sure you put yours in, otherwise it's not going to function. And that should about finish it off for our manifest. So I'll save that. Now if I were to run this program, it'll work. Why? Because there's nothing to it yet. It's not yet doing anything of interest, so let me go into the Java here, then I can control F11 and run as a Android. So let me get rid of this. Oops, and that was a previous one as well. And it may have popped up there in the meantime. Launching the Google demo. There we go. Hello world, and that's it. So far, nothing at all interesting. So what we need to do now is we need to add to my layout the Google widget, if you will, to actually display it. Now it turns out that this isn't just a standard sort of button or text view. It's not a standard view that we're working with. It's going to be a full, it's going to be the full maps, what they call a fragment. Now a fragment isn't just a text view or some view, it actually brings along with it some functionality. So we're going to want to bring in that whole fragment. So let me just copy and paste it in. You could try doing this through the graphical side. It's a bit easier to just do it through the text side here. So I'm going to bring it in here. It's going to be, we're going to name it maps. It's going to implement the this fragment. And we're going to tell it to fill the parent. Now I need to place it somewhere on the screen. So it's like any other component. So I'm going to say Android, and I'm going to say layout, under scoops, lay, layout below. I'm going to put it below this text view. So let's give this text view a name, Android ID, and create a new ID. Let's call this header. And so I'm going to put this below my header. So plus ID, backslash header. And I have a typo here, so let me just fix that. Android. And I still have a typo. Android. And now that's happy. If I switch to the graphical view, we can see it. It's laid out the way I want, but it's not showing me anything yet because it's not actually contacting the Google servers. So now I've got the manifest updated, I've got the activity set. I'm going to go and I'm going to try and run it. Now as it turns out, this isn't going to work. And I'll talk about why in a moment. It'll come up, and it'll immediately crash. It's often instructive to see how things go wrong, because then you can actually try and fix them. So what I want to do now is I want to make sure I check in here under my log cat. I'll expand that out to see what's going wrong. And we see one of the things it's complaining about is caused by, all this is caused by, it was unable to find the Google Maps fragment. So all in here, it's unable to access that. Well, it turns out we have to do more than what we've done so far. We also have to import into my project, or into my workspace, the appropriate project. So this project is part of what you downloaded. One thing I forgot to mention at the very start is we want to make sure that we've downloaded the appropriate extras. So if I go here to the Android SDK Manager, if I scroll right to the bottom, under Extras, there is the Google Play Services. So I'm going to click that and check it. It's already installed for me. And so that's the first thing. It's going to install into your SDK folder for your tools. And it's going to give you a lot of necessary things. And we're going to use that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to say Import. Under the Android folder, I'll expand that out, and we're going to import some existing Android code into the workspace. Now we're going to figure out exactly where we put that. You may have installed your tools in something like c:/Android or under Program Files. I happen to have installed it in a different place. And so let me just, do I have that? No, I don't have that here. So we'll just have to browse for that. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to find it, and it is on my D drive, Utils, Programming, Android, this version, and here we have the folder. So this is probably what your folder looks like. Under here, you'll find the SDK, under Extras, under Google, Google Play Services, and finally, Lib Project. So select the Lib Project folder. It's going to find all the projects in it, and this is the only one we want, the Google Play Services lib. And click OK and click Finish. Now it's imported it in. The second thing we need to do is we need to change our project to reference it. So right click on it and go to Properties, slightly off screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, inside here, you may have sort of been elsewhere, click on the Android on the left. Under the Libraries area, click Add, and we're going to add in the Google Play Services. Double click that, apply, OK. Now that that's imported, I can Control F11 again in my code, and now it should actually work. Reminder that my Android virtual device here has been modified to allow me to run the Google services inside of it as opposed to on a physical device. And here we see that we've got some other problems. Failed to find provider. Oh, maybe that's just failed to provide provider of Google services. And it comes up here. And now it's trying to download here all the content, and it's showing us at latitude 0, longitude 0. A note, if it doesn't show you anything here, if it's just blank, it means you probably have the API key incorrect compared to your package name. Double check the package name as well as double check your API key that you put in the manifest. Okay, so now we at least are kind of off the ground. We've got something running. That's great. Now what can we do with this? Well, it turns out there's a lot of things we can do. So let's go back into my code here, and let's start by changing the UI. So I'll come back over here to the graphical side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a few buttons. I'm going to put in all 3 buttons here. I'm going to give this one a name, stretching it out a little. Let's call this City. And I'm going to give it Text City. And I'm going to set up each of these to be something else. Now, as it turns out, the university I work for, Simon Fraser University, has a couple campuses. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set it up so that it's going to map between the 2 campuses. So Burnaby, and we're going to come up with a one for Surrey. And let's try that again, just in case it. Alright. And Surrey. Now what I need to do is for each of these, I'm going to set up an on-click event. So I'm going to call this on-click Surrey. I'm going to go to Burnaby, on-click Burnaby, and we'll do on-click City. So we'll set up each of those, and then I need to configure this so that it actually lays out below the one I want. And so I'm going to here. The easiest way to do that actually is going to be probably through my XML. I found it doesn't resize nicely usually. So I'm just going to move one of my buttons up above the fragment. And here for the fragment, let's make it be just below button, sorry. And I'm going to get rid of this text view. Check the layout, and that's probably what I wanted. Now going back into my activity, I need to implement those. So I'm going to put in here a public void on click, I called it, and then we had one for city. Taking in a view, v. I'm going to duplicate that twice and make it for the Burnaby. And sorry. Fix the imports, we're good to go. Right, now what do we actually want to do with this? Well, I want to make it so that when I click those buttons, I begin interacting with the Google Maps. Now, one great way to do this is to start by creating at the top here a private field, and we're going to make this a Google Map object. Let's call it map. And then during when activity starts up, we're going to find it. So I'm going to say map is equal to, and I have to do a couple things here. I'm just going to copy and paste the code that Google suggests us to use. Again, this is all back from the web page that we saw initially. I'm going to auto fix some imports, and those will clear up those issues there. That was Control-Shift-O. So now I've actually got something I can work with. Let's make it that when I click on something, it can take me to a location. Well, where do I want it to take me? Well, I happen to have already found out a couple of locations. I went to the Google Maps and figured out some GPS coordinates that it thought for the locations I was looking for. So I'm going to make some here. Private, final, and let's call it, it's a lat long is the object type. And I'm going to call this location, and let's make it Burnaby is equal to a new lat long, and I pass in two coordinates here. I'll just copy and paste them over. So for wherever location you like, this is going to be your latitude and longitude what you're working with. Again, fixing the imports to make it all work. I'm going to duplicate that same code, except I'm going to switch it over to Surrey, so I'll just copy that in again. And so now I've got the latitude and longitude for the 2 points of interest. Now, to change the location, let's check out this. Why is this not happy? We see here it's got an error. It says a call requires API 11. I'm currently at API 8 for the minimum. So let's switch this over to API 11. How do I do that? Well, it's in the manifest. And it's up here under minimum API version. So it said it wanted 11. I'll switch that to 11 here. If you need to support a previous version, you may have to look into how to sort of support older functionality or new functionality in an old version. So when we click city, let's actually center on the right location. So to do this, I need to come up with what's called a camera update. Let's call it update. And I'm going to use that's a camera update factory. And we're going to create a I think I need to fix updates here. Camera update factory dot, and then I'm going to create a new lat long, and I'm just going to change it to a new latitude. So where do I want to go? Well, location. Let's make it center on Burnaby. Be a nice central location. And that's not doing anything at the moment. I need to apply this to the map. So I can say on the map dot animate camera. Animate camera, and I pass in a camera update, and so that's going to be my update. So now when I click on city, it's going to move to that location. Let's try it. So these two buttons don't do anything for me at the moment. clicking on city will pan me over. It crashed. Well, let's check out why. So we performed a click, and we tried to call the onClick, and we probably have a typo in the name. Could not find method onClick city. I forgot the underscore in my name. So let's go back and fix that. So here, onClick, onClick underscore city. I like to have that sort of format. It allows me to quickly identify my callback functions. So save that and carry on. So now as it downloads, we'll try this out. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to try and set up some other things. We're going to make it zoom the camera up and down, as well as we'll make it change the tiles. And then finally, I'm going to add a marker. Wait till it loads up. Click on city. We can see it panning to the appropriate location. So it's now centered on, if I were to zoom in a lot, it'll zoom in all the way down into Burnaby. So there we have it. So let's make it zoom as well. So I could have I'm going to update this, so I'm going to comment this line out. I'm going to duplicate the line. And it turns out there's a function new lat long zoom. So you zoom in as well. And you specify a zoom level. You can zoom anywhere between 0 and 21. 0 showing you the world, 21 showing you kind of the a dime on the sidewalk, if it had that great of a resolution. It does not. So we're going to specify 16 here. I did this through trial and error and found that that's going to give me a zoom of about city size. Now rather than doing this all at once, I want to do one more thing, and I'm going to also switch the tiles. I'm going to say map.setMap. Typo again. Map.set map type, and I can pass in a map type here. This is going to be in the Google Map class, and I can pick any of these types. Let's go with the satellite view. Take the satellite view, rerun that, and let that download. And as that downloads into the application, I'm going to copy this code here into the other remaining points, and we're going to change it around so that instead of, well, for Burnaby, we want to be Burnaby, same location, except instead of being 16, I'm going to zoom into level 14. And let's change it to a different map type. And let's change it to terrain. And then finally here, I'm going to switch to the Surrey location. And let's make this be a zoom level of 9. Nope, pardon me, I think I've got this backwards. Sorry, 16 is going to zoom in more. 9, let's try it. We've already downloaded it. 16 zooms in quite a bit. So that's going to be pretty tight. That's tighter than I wanted. I wanted to zoom out. We're talking about seeing the whole system. So instead of being 16, it needs to be a lower number. Let's try 9. So I'll rerun that. So every one of these should demonstrate a different map tile set, as well as a different zoom level or location. So we'll go to the city, zooms in, and it shows me the city from a satellite view. I can click on Burnaby, it zooms in, switching the tile set, and shows me the terrain. So I can zoom out, I can zoom in on here. I can pan as well if I want to click and drag. And let's go to Surrey, so it zooms over, so it pans, zooms in, and shows me here I'm using the satellite view. And let's switch actually that for city. I'm going to switch this to be, let's make it a normal view. And so when we run that, we'll check that again. Now before rerunning it, I want to go and demonstrate how to actually create a marker. So to put a marker on your screen, I can say map, I'm going to do this in my onCreate, add a marker, and then I need to pass in the marker options. So new marker options. And then on this, I'm going to use sort of a builder pattern, and I'm going to set the position. Let me just make sure I got that right. Marker options. And on that, I think, yeah, once I import it, then it should be happier. So then I can say dot positions, or position, pardon me, and it needs a latitude. So let's put it in the location for, say, Surrey. and then I'm going to set up a title, which is the string I want, and let's say find me here. So now I'm going to rerun this. Again, zooms in on 0, 0. You can configure that as to how it's going to start up. So here we see the city with the marker. If I click on the marker, it says find me here. I'll go to Burnaby, it'll zoom in on Burnaby. I'll click Surrey, it'll zoom in on Surrey, and showing the normal view. And it's zoomed quite far in, showing the building of where we're looking. Okay, so that concludes the things I wanted to show. I wanted to give a quick recap on some of the troubleshooting that you may be facing. The first one is if you end up with blank tiles inside of your API, double check that you've got the right code. So double check your package matches exactly what you told Google it would. Go to your manifest and make sure that your package in here also matches that. That's what Google's going to be looking at. And then down here, when you actually create it, you want to make sure these two match as well. Those are critical to getting anything to display. If you see it saying that if it doesn't even start at startup and you get an error message saying that the maps.fragment path couldn't be found, make sure you set up this import. So that's done by right-clicking, going to Properties, and under Android, setting up this after you've imported it into your workspace. Another thing you can have is if your emulator comes up with a button that says please install the Google Maps API or Google services, it means that you haven't done the appropriate changes to your emulator to allow it to work. Try running it on some physical hardware, or look up online how to set up those changes. Okay, that concludes this tutorial. Thank you for watching.